See the power cord, the precious, precious power cord. He went all the way back to St. Bernard's for that.
Because I love her.
Because he loves me. Yes. Thank you so much. You can come say hi, Pat. Just put your head in. Let's see who's here.
Hi, Pat.
Yeah, and nobody's here right now.
Okay, sounds good.
No one's there to look at you, but that's okay.
You're lucky.
Okay. So here we are. It is April Fool's Day. Can you believe it? It's 1 o'clock. Again, I am Mrs. Brickson, principal at St. Bernard's School, and it is April 1st, 2020. This is number 11 of our St. Bernard's books with the St. Bernard's books with Mrs. Brickson. I can't even speak. Anyway, so we're going to get started. And I want to get started, but I want to make sure we have people watching today. Let's see who we have watching. Do we have anybody here that can come in and see me? Hello, hello, hello. Is anybody out there? Anyone out there? Yes.
I'm playing downstairs. I have to for band.
No. Hi, I am going to be live.
It's on a Zoom, so I have to. It's required. So I'm going to go do that.
Okay. Hi. So we're going to be starting here. Oh, Aurora's online. That's awesome. Aurora's here. Oh, hey, we got the folks, girls. Hello, hello. How are you? I got my shirt. Principal I am. See, take a look here. Mrs. Zare has joined us. It's good to see all of you guys. Hello. And no, I'm trying a few different things here, and I'm not sure if this is going to work. I'm trying to get some different aspects for our little technology, but you know, I'm trying. Anyway, with that being said, we're going to go say, oh, there we go, Mrs. Zare and Aurora. Yes. Hi, Kendall. Oh, there are a couple Kendalls, right? We got a couple Kendalls on, don't we? And I see we got Sophia and Chico are on. Great, great, great. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. But of course, we have ads that start right in. Here we go. Here we start singing along. Okay, try the motions. Ready? All right, good job, you guys. Good job, good job, good job. Anyways, we have our joke for today, and I was so excited to have this whole technology thing for you today, but apparently it didn't want to work. Anyway, but we do have a joke for today. What? Since you guys are on a computer or maybe a phone or an iPad, we have a joke here. What is an astronaut? An astronaut, up in space. An astronaut's favorite part of a computer. What is an astronaut's favorite part of a computer? The space bar. Yes, thank you very much. I know it's very exciting. Yes. Okay. So anyway, astronaut's favorite part of the computer, the space bar. I almost gave it away when I said the astronauts up in space. Again, just a reminder, if for some reason that you have missed out or you're coming late and you missed one of the days, you can always go to the playlist. This is a YouTube playlist. I made it a lot shorter for you using Bitly. And make sure you just kind of write that down and that you were able to come back and check it out. It'll also be on this St. Bernard's Parents and Schools website. Okay? One thing I want to do is a quick announcement to all you parents out there. Since we've had the coronavirus, we've had a bunch of things change, and along with our online registration, which is taking a lot longer than we thought. Anyway, so I'm going to be sending out an email today to you parents and also to new parents, and hopefully just some information about what we can do in the meantime to make sure that we can get people registered in the spots that you want. Because, you know, you're at St. Bernard's, we just love having you all here and miss you so much. Well, let's go ahead and begin. I gotta take my drink before I begin. So again, we're reading the book Holes by Louis Sachar, and we've learned about Stanley Yelnats, this guy. Stanley Yelnats is a young boy who's in middle school, and it seems like his family's come from generations of bad luck, and he has they even blame it on his, I'm trying to remember this, no good pig stealing great grandfather, who's also named Stanley. Oh, I see Carol. Oh, I see the Rath boys have joined. You guys, it was Sam's birthday yesterday. It was Sam Rath's birthday yesterday. Yay! And I didn't get a chance. I didn't know it was your birthday, Sam, until at the end when I saw the comments. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, belated, dear Sam. Happy birthday to you. May the dear Lord bless you. May the dear Lord bless you. May the dear Lord bless Sam. May the dear Lord bless you. Yay, Sam Rath. Okay. Anyway, so as we're continuing here, Stanley got caught breaking the law, and instead of going to jail, he chose to go to this camp. It's like a correctional camp, and for 18 months, Camp Green Lake. As you can see, there is no green, and there is no lake. There used to be a lake. We'll hear about that coming up. In this place, all they do is they dig holes 5 feet wide. I'm trying to, it's hard to do this on the computer, and 5 feet deep. If they find anything, they're supposed to give it directly to the warden. Anyway, we have not met yet. We have met Mr. Sir. Remember, he gave up smoking and he eats a ton of sunflower seeds. And we also met Mr. Podansky, who is kind of like the person who's in charge of their little area. And he seems like he's kind of nice, but sometimes they call him Mom. And some of the other boys, excuse me, names like Zero, who doesn't do any talking. And we have X-Ray and I'm looking here, Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. Okay. And then, okay, so Armpit, remember Armpit sound, or Theodore, seemed like he was a nice guy at first. And then as soon as Mr. Podansky, he threw Stanley to the ground, you know, just kind of said, it's Armpit, and he wasn't very nice to him. So right now we're not really sure who Stanley can kind of trust. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Chapter 6. Stanley took a shower, if you could call it that, ate dinner, if you could call it that, and went to bed, if you could call it his smelly, scratchy cot a bed. Because of the scarcity of water, each camper was only allowed a 4-minute shower. So kids, just try timing it and get a feel for that. Imagine what they're doing during the day and then try to take a 4-minute shower. It took Stanley nearly that long to get used to water. There was no knob for hot water. He kept stepping into, then jumping back out from, into the spray, out, and then until the water shut off automatically. He never managed to use his bar of soap, which is just as well because he wouldn't have had time to rinse off the suds. Dinner was some kind of stewed meat and vegetables. The meat was brown, and the vegetables had once been green. Everything tasted pretty much the same. He ate it all and used a slice of white bread to mop up the juice. Stanley had never been one to leave food on his plate, no matter how it tasted. "What did you do?" one of the campers asked him. At first, Stanley didn't know what he meant. "They sent you here for a reason." Oh, he realized, I stole a pair of sneakers. The other boys thought this was pretty funny. Stanley wasn't sure why. Maybe because their crimes were a lot worse than stealing shoes. "From a store, were they on somebody's feet?" said Squid. Neither," Stanley answered. "They belonged to Clyde Livingston." Nobody believed him. "Sweet feet?" said X-Ray. "Yeah, right." "No way," said Squid. Now, as Stanley lay on his cot, he thought it was kind of funny in a way. Nobody had believed him when he said he was innocent. Now, when he said that he stole them, nobody believed him either. Clyde Sweetfeet Livingston was a famous baseball player. He led the American League in stolen bases over the last 3 years. He was also the only player in history to ever hit 4 triples in one game. Stanley had a poster of him hanging on the wall of his bedroom. He used to have a poster anyway. He didn't know where it was now. It had been taken by the police and was used as evidence of guilt in the courtroom. Clyde Livingston also came to court. In spite of everything, when Stanley found out that Sweetfeet was going to be there, he was actually excited about the prospect of meeting his hero. Clyde Livingston testified that they were his sneakers and that he had donated them to help raise money for the homeless shelter. He said he couldn't imagine what kind of horrible person would steal from homeless children. That was the worst part for Stanley. His hero thought that he was a no-good, dirty, rotten thief. As Stanley tried to turn over on his cot, he was afraid it was going to collapse under all his weight. He barely fit in it. When he managed to roll over on his stomach, the smell was so bad that he had to turn over again and try sleeping on his back. The cot smelled like sour milk. Though it was night, the air was still very warm. An armpit was snoring 2 cots away. By the way, if you happen to want to follow along, and your book kind of looks like this, or I'm not sure, maybe you have the book holes. We are on page 23. If anyone's interested, if they want to follow along, I'm on page 23. I'm right in the middle. And then next time I kind of pause, I'll kind of update you to what page we're on in case you ever get lost. Chapter 6, page 23. Back at school, a bully named Derek Dunn used to torment Stanley. The teachers never took Stanley's complaints seriously because Derek was so much smaller than Stanley. Some teachers even seemed to find it amusing that a little kid like Derek could pick on someone as big as Stanley. On the day Stanley was arrested, Derek had taken Stanley's notebook, and after a long game of come and get it, by the time Stanley retrieved it, he had missed his bus and had to walk home. It was while he was walking home carrying his wet notebook that the prospect of having to copy the ruined pages, that the sneakers fell from the sky. "I was walking home and the sneakers fell from the sky," he had told the judge. "One hit me in the head. It had hurt too." They hadn't exactly fallen from the sky. He had just walked out from underneath a freeway overpass when the shoe hit him on the head. Stanley took this as some sort of a sign. His father had been trying to figure a way to recycle old tennis shoes, and suddenly a pair of sneakers fell right on top of him, seemingly out of nowhere, like a gift from God. Naturally, he had no way of knowing they belonged to Clyde Livingston. In fact, these shoes were anything but sweet. Whoever had worn them had a bad case of foot odor. Stanley couldn't help but think that there was something special about these shoes. They would somehow provide the key to his father's invention. It was too much of a coincidence to be a mere accident. Stanley had felt like he was holding destiny's shoes. He ran. Thinking back now, he wasn't sure why he ran. Maybe he was in a hurry to bring the shoes back to his father, or maybe he was trying to run away from his miserable and humiliating day at school. A patrol car pulled alongside of him. A policeman asked him why he was running. Then he took the shoes and made a call on his radio. Shortly thereafter, Stanley was arrested. It turned out the sneakers had been stolen from a display at the homeless shelter. That evening, rich people were going to come to the shelter and pay $100 to eat the food that the poor people ate every day for free. Clyde Livingston, who had once lived at the shelter when he was younger, was going to speak and sign autographs, and his shoes would be auctioned, and it was expected that they would sell for over $500. All the money would go to help the homeless. Because of the baseball schedule, Stanley's trial was delayed several months. His parents couldn't afford a lawyer. "You don't need a lawyer," his mother said. "Just tell the truth." Stanley told the truth, but perhaps it would have been better if he lied a little. He could have said he found the shoes in the street. No one would believe they fell from the sky. It wasn't destiny, he realized. It was his no-good, dirty, rotten pig stealing great-great-grandfather. The judge called Stanley's crime despicable. The shoes were valued at over $5,000. It was money that would provide food and shelter for the homeless. And you stole that from them, just so you could have a souvenir. The judge said that there was an opening at Camp Green Lake, and he suggested that the discipline of the camp might improve Stanley's character. It was either that or jail. Stanley's parents asked if they could have some time to find out more about Camp Green Lake, but the judge advised them to make a quick decision. Vacancies don't last long at Camp Green Lake. Okay, now on Chapter 7. Chapter 7, page 26, if you're following along, page 26. I don't know if you can hear it or not. Ellie's practicing her saxophone. She's in band at Lincoln, and she's practicing her saxophone upstairs. She's a Zoom meeting right now, so she has to play in that. She's trying to find the quietest spot in the house. Anyway, let's continue. Chapter 7. The shovel felt heavy in Stanley's soft, fleshy hands. He tried to jam it into the earth, but the blade banged against the ground and bounced off without making a dent. The vibrations ran up the shaft of the shovel into Stanley's wrist, making his bones rattle. It was still dark. The only light came from the moon and the stars. More stars than Stanley had ever seen. It seemed like he'd only just gotten to sleep when Mr. Podansky came in and woke everybody up. Using all his might, he brought the shovel back down into the dry lake bed. The force stung his hands, but made no impression on the dirt. He wondered if he had a defective shovel. He glanced at Zero, 15 feet away, who scooped out a shovelful of dirt and dumped it in a pile that was already almost a foot tall. For breakfast, they'd been served some sort of lukewarm cereal. The best was the orange juice. They each got a pint carton. The cereal actually didn't taste too bad, but it had smelled just like his cot. Then they filled their canteens, got their shovels, and were marched out across the lake. Each group was assigned a different area. The shovels were kept in a shed near the showers. They all looked the same to Stanley, although X-Ray had his own special shovel, which no one was allowed to use. X-Ray claimed it was shorter than the others, but if it was only by a fraction of an inch. The shovels were 5 feet long from the tip of the steel blade to the end of the wooden shaft. Stanley's hole would have to be as deep as his shovel, and he'd be able to lay the shovel flat against the bottom in any direction. That is why X-Ray wanted the shortest shovel. The lake was so full of holes and mounds that it reminded Stanley of pictures he'd seen of the moon. "If you find anything interesting or unusual," Mr. Podansky told him, "you should report it either to me or Mr. Sir when we come around with the water truck. If the warden likes what you found, then you'll get the rest of the day off." "What are we supposed to be looking for?" Stanley asked him. "You're not looking for anything. You're digging to build character. It's just if you find anything, the warden would like to know about it." He glanced helplessly at his shovel. It wasn't defective. He was defective. He noticed a thin crack in the ground. He placed the point of his shovel on top of it and then jumped on the back of the blade with both feet. The shovel sank a few inches into the packed earth. He smiled. For once in his life, it paid to be overweight. He leaned on the shaft and pried up his first shovel full of dirt, and he dumped it off to the side. Only 10 million to go, he thought, and then placed the shovel back in the crack and jumped on it again. He entered several shovelfuls of dirt this manner before it occurred to him that he was dumping his dirt within the perimeter of his hole. He laid the shovel flat on the ground and marked where the edges of his hole would be. 5 feet. It was awfully wide. He moved the dirt he already dug up out past his mark. He took a drink from his canteen. 5 feet would be awfully deep, too. The digging got easier after a while. The ground was hardest at the surface, and where the sun had baked a crust about 8 inches deep. Beneath that, the earth was looser, but by the time Stanley broke past the crust, a blister had formed in the middle of his right thumb, and it hurt to shovel. Now I'm going to tell you something. We're going to be going into the next paragraph. And the first time I read this, I was a little surprised, and I'm like, "What are they talking about?" This is actually 2 stories or almost 3 stories in one. Okay, so we're talking about Stanley, right? Digging holes and stuff like that. But what we're now shifting into, it's like going back in time to hear about Stanley's great-great-grandfather and his story. And that is really interesting. So we're going to go back in time through those different things. Excuse me. Stanley's great-great-grandfather was named Ilya Yelnats. He was born in Latvia. When he was 15 years old, he fell in love with Myrna Menke. He didn't know he was Stanley's great-great-grandfather. Myrna Menke was 14. She would turn 15 in 2 months, at which time her father decided that she would be to be married. Elia went to her father Elia went to her father to ask for her hand, but so did Igor Barkov, the pig farmer. Igor was 57 years old. He had a red nose and fat, puffy cheeks. "I will trade you my fattest pig for your daughter," Igor offered. "What have you got?" Mira's father asked Elia. "A heart full of love," said Elia. "I'd rather have a fat pig," said Myrna's father. Desperate, Elia went to go see Madame Zeroni, an old Egyptian woman who lived at the edge of town. He had become friends with her, and though she was quite a bit older than him, she was even older than Igor Barkov. The other boys of the village liked to mud wrestle. Elia preferred visiting Madame Zeroni and listening to her many stories. Madame Zeroni had dark skin and a very wide mouth. When she looked at you, her eyes seemed to expand, and you felt like she was looking right through you. "Elia, what's wrong?" she asked before he even told her he was upset. She was sitting in a homemade wheelchair. She had no left foot. Her leg stopped at her ankle. "I'm in love with Myrna Menke," Elia confessed. "But Igor Barkov has offered to trade his fattest pig for her. I can't compete with that." "Good," said Madame Zeroni. "You're too young to get married. You've got your whole life ahead of you." "But I love Myrna. Myrna's head is as empty as a flower pot. But she's beautiful. So is a flower pot. Can she push a plow? Can she milk a goat? No, she is too delicate. Can she have an intelligent conversation? No, she is silly and foolish. Will she take care of you when you are sick? No, she is spoiled and will only want you to take care of her. So, she is beautiful. So what?" Madame Zeroni spat in the dirt. She told Elia he should go to America. "Like my son, that's where your future lies, not with Myrna Menke." But Elia would hear none of this. He was 15, and all he could see was Myrna's shallow beauty. Madame Zeroni hated to see Elia so forlorn. Against her better judgment, she agreed to help him. "It just so happens my sow gave birth to a litter of piglets yesterday," she said. "There is one little runt whom she won't suckle. You may have him. He would die anyway." Madame Zeroni led Elia around the back of her house where she kept her pigs. Elia took the tiny piglet, but he didn't see what good it would do him. It wasn't much bigger than a rat. "He'll grow," Madame Zeroni assured him. "Do you see the mountains at the edge of the forest?" "Yes," said Elia. "On the top of the mountain there is a stream where the water runs uphill. You must carry the piglet every day to the top of the mountain and let him drink from the stream. As it drinks, you are to sing to him." She taught Elia a special song to sing to the pig. "On the day of Myrna's 15th birthday, you should carry the pig back up the mountain for the last time. Then take it directly to Myrna's father. It will be fatter than any of Igor's pigs." "If it's that big and fat," Elia said, "how will I be able to carry it up the mountain?" "The piglet is not too heavy for you now, is it?" asked Madame Zeroni. "Of course not," said Elia. "Do you think it will be too heavy for you tomorrow?" "No." "Every day you will carry the pig up the mountain. It will get a little bigger, but you will get a little stronger. And after you give the pig to Myrna's father, I want you to do one more thing for me." "Anything," said Elia. "I want you to carry me up the mountain. I want to drink from the stream, and I want you to sing this song to me." Elia promised that he would. Madame Zeroni warned that if he failed to do this, he and his descendants would be doomed for all of eternity. At that time, Elia thought nothing of the curse. He was just a 15-year-old kid, and eternity didn't seem like much longer than a week from Tuesday. Besides, he liked Madame Zeroni and would be glad to carry up the mountain. He would have done it right then and there, but he wasn't strong enough yet. Whoop! Fast forward to the future. Here's Stanley. Stanley was still digging. His hole is about 3 feet deep, but only in the center. It sloped toward the edges. The sun had only just come up over the horizon, but he already could see its hot rays against his face. He reached down to pick up his canteen, and he felt a sudden rush of dizziness. And he put his hands on his knees to steady himself. For a moment he was afraid he would throw up. But the moment passed. He drank the last drop of water from his canteen. He had blisters on every one of his fingers and one in the center of each palm. Everyone else's holes was a lot deeper than his. He couldn't actually see their holes, but he could tell by the size of their dirt piles. He saw a cloud of dust moving across the wasteland and noticed that the other boys had stopped digging and were watching it too. The dirt cloud moved closer. You could see that it trailed behind a red pickup truck. The truck stopped near where they were digging, and the boys lined up behind it. X-ray in front, 0 at the rear. Stanley got in line behind 0. Okay. Mr. Sir filled each of the canteens from a tank of water in the bed of the pickup. As he took Stanley's canteen from him, he said, "This isn't the Girl Scouts, is it?" Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. Mr. Sir followed Stanley back to his hole to see how he was doing. "You better get on with it," he said, "or else you'll be going to be digging in the hottest part of the day." He popped some sunflower seeds in his mouth, deftly removing the shells with his teeth, and spit them into Stanley's hole. Whoop. Here, I'll go like this when we change time. Ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Every day, Elia carried the little piglet up the mountain and sang to it as it drank from the stream. As the piglet grew fatter, Elia grew stronger. On the day of Myrna's 15th birthday, Elia's pig weighed over 50 stones. Madame Zeroni had told him to carry the pig up the mountain on that day as well, but Elia didn't want to present himself to Myrna smelling like a pig. Instead, he took a bath. It was his second bath in less than a week. Then he led the pig to Myrna's. Igor Barkov was there with his pig as well. These are two of the finest pigs I have ever seen, Myrna's father declared. He was also impressed with Elia, who seemed to have grown bigger and stronger in the last 2 months. I used to think that you were nothing but a good-for-nothing book reader, he said, but I see now you could be an excellent mud wrestler. May I marry your daughter? Elia boldly asked. First, I must weigh the pigs. Alas, poor Elia should have carried his pig up the mountain one last time. The 2 pigs weighed exactly the same. Stanley's blisters had ripped open and now new blisters formed. He kept changing his grip on the shovel, trying to avoid the pain. Finally, he removed his cap and held it between the shaft of his shovel and his raw hands. This helped, but digging was getting harder because the cap would slip and slide. The sun beat down on his unprotected head and neck. Though he tried to convince himself otherwise, he had been aware for a while that his piles of dirt were too close to his hole. The piles were outside of his 5-foot circle, but he was going to see that he was going to run out of room. Still, he pretended otherwise and kept adding more dirt to the piles that he would eventually have to move. The problem was that when the dirt was on the ground, it was compacted, expanded when it was excavated. The piles were a lot bigger than his hole was deep. It was either now or later. Reluctantly, he climbed out of his hole, once again dug his shovel into previously dug dirt, and moved the pile. Myrna's father got down on his hands and knees and closely inspected the pig, tail to snout. These are the 2 of the finest pigs I've ever seen, he said at last. How am I to decide? I have only one daughter. Why not let Myrna decide? Elia said. That's preposterous, claimed Igor, expelling saliva as he spoke. Myrna's an empty-headed girl, said his father. How can she possibly decide when I, her father, cannot? Myrna's father rubbed his chin. Then he laughed and said, Why not? He slapped Elia on the back. It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig. He summoned his daughter. Elia blushed when Myrna entered the room. Good afternoon, Myrna, he said. She looked at him. You're Elia, right? She asked. Myrna, said her father, Elia and Igor has Eve offered a pig in your hand in marriage. It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig, so I'll let you make the choice. Whom do you wish to marry? Myrna looked confused. You want me to decide? That's right, my blossom, said her father. Gee, I don't know, said Myrna. Which pig weighs more? They both weigh the same, said her father. Gee, I don't know, said Myrna. Golly, said Myrna. I guess I choose Elia. No. Igor. No. Elia. No. Igor? I know. I'll think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll marry whoever guesses the closest number. Okay. I'm ready. 10, guessed Igor. Elia said nothing. Elia, said Myrna, what number do you guess? Elia didn't pick a number. Marry Igor, he muttered. You can keep my pig as a wedding present. The next time the water truck came, it was driven by Mr. Pedansky, who also brought sack lunches. Stanley sat with his back against the pile of dirt and ate. He had a bologna sandwich, potato chips, and a large chocolate chip cookie. How you doing? Said Magnet. Not real good, said Stanley. Well, the first hole is the hardest, Magnet said. Stanley took a long, deep breath. He couldn't afford to dawdle. He was way behind the others, and the sun just kept getting hotter. It wasn't even noon yet, but he didn't know if he had the strength to stand up. He thought about quitting. He wondered, what would they do to him? What could they do to him? His clothes were soaked with sweat. In school, he had learned that sweating was good for you. It was nature's way of keeping you cool. So why was he so hot? Using his shovel for support, he managed to get to his feet. Where are we supposed to go to the bathroom? He asked Mignet. Mignet gestured his arms to a great expanse around them. Pick a hole, any hole, he said. Stanley staggered across the lake, almost falling over a dirt pile. Behind him, he heard Mignet say, but first, make sure that nothing's living in it. After leaving Myrna's house, Elia wandered aimlessly through the town till he found himself down by the wharf. He sat at the edge of a pier and stared down into the cold, black water. He did not understand how Myrna had trouble deciding between him and Igor. He thought she loved him. Even if she didn't love him, couldn't she see what a foul person Igor was? It was like Madame Zeroni had said. Her face was as empty as a flower pot. Some men were gathering on another dock, and he went to see what was going on. A sign read, Deck hands wanted, free passage to America. Excuse me. He had no sailing experience, but the ship's captain signed him aboard. The captain could see Elia was a man of great strength. Not everybody could carry a full-grown pig up the side of a mountain. It wasn't until the ship had cleared the harbor and was heading out across the Atlantic that he suddenly remembered his promise to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain. He felt terrible. He wasn't afraid of the curse. He thought that was a lot of nonsense. He felt bad because he knew Madame Zeroni had wanted a drink from the stream before she died. I swallowed my water run. Zero was the smallest kid in Camp D, but he was the first one to finish digging. You're finished? Stanley asked enviously. Zero said nothing. Stanley walked over to Zero's hole and watched him measure it with his shovel. The top of his hole was a perfect circle, and the sides were smooth and steep. Not one dirt clod more than necessary had been removed from the earth. Zero pulled himself to the surface. He didn't even smile. He looked down his perfectly dug hole, spat in it, and turned and headed back to the camp compound. Zero's one weird dude, said Zigzag. Stanley would have laughed, but he didn't have the strength. Zigzag had to be the weirdest dude Stanley had ever seen. He had a long, skinny neck and a big, round head with wild, frizzy blonde hair that stuck out in all directions. His head seemed to bob up and down on his neck like it was a spring. Armpit was the second one to finish digging. He also spat into his hole before heading back to the camp compound. One by one, Stanley watched each of the boys spit into his hole and return to the camp compound. Stanley kept digging. His hole was almost up to his shoulders, though it was hard to tell exactly where the ground level was, because his dirt piles completely surrounded the hole. The deeper he got, the harder it was to raise the dirt up out of the hole. Once again, he realized he was going to have to move the piles. His cap was stained from blood from his hands, and he felt like he was digging his own grave. In America, Elio learned to speak English. He fell in love with a woman named Sarah Miller. She could push a plow, milk a goat, and most importantly, think for herself. She and Elia often stayed up half the night talking and laughing together. Their life was not easy. Elia worked hard, but bad luck seemed to follow him wherever he went. He always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He remembered Madame Zeroni telling him that she had a son in America. Elia was forever looking for him. He'd walk up to complete strangers and ask if they knew someone named Zeroni or had ever heard of anyone named Zeroni. No one did. Elia was sure what he what he would do if he ever found Madame Zeroni's son anyway. Carry him up a mountain and sing a pig lullaby to him? After his barn was struck by lightning for the third time, he told Sarah about his broken promise to Madame Zeroni. I'm worse than a pig thief, he said. You should leave me and find someone who isn't cursed. I'm not leaving you, said Sarah, but I do want you to do one thing for me. Anything, said Elia. Sarah smiled. Sing me the pig lullaby. He sang it for her. Her eyes sparkled. Oh, that's so pretty. What does it mean? Elia tried his best to translate it from Latvian into English, but it wasn't the same. It rhymes in Latvian, he told her. I could tell, Sarah said. A year later, the child was born, and Sarah named him Stanley because she knows that Stanley was Yelnats spelled backward. Sarah changed the words of the pig lullaby so that they rhymed, and every night she sang it to little Stanley. If only the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was as soft as the skies, while the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, crying to the moon. If only, if only. Stanley's hole was as deep as his shovel, but not quite wide enough on bottom. He grimaced as he sliced off a chunk of dirt and then raised it up and flung it onto the pile. Oh, I forgot to do this part. He laid his shovel back down to the bottom of his hole, and to his surprise, it fit. He rotated it and only had to chip off a few chunks of dirt here and there before it could lie flat across the hole in every direction. He heard the water truck approaching and felt a strange sense of pride at being able to show Mr. Sir and Mr. Bridansky that he had dug his first hole. He put his hands on the rim and tried to pull himself up. He couldn't do it. His arms were too weak to lift his heavy body. He used his legs to help, but he just didn't have any strength. He was trapped in his hole. It was almost funny, but he was not in the mood to laugh. Stanley, he heard Mr. Bridansky call. Using his shovel, he dug 2 footholds in the hole wall. He climbed out to see Mr. Bridansky walking over to him. I was afraid you fainted, Mr. Bridansky said. You shouldn't. You wouldn't have been the first. I'm finished, Stanley said, putting his blood-splattered cap back on his head. All right, said Mr. Bridansky, raising his hand for a high five. But Stanley ignored it. He didn't have the strength. Mr. Bridansky lowered his hand and looked down at Stanley's hole. Well done, he said. You want to ride back? Stanley shook his head. I'll walk. Mr. Bridansky climbed back into the truck without filling Stanley's canteen. Stanley waited for him to drive away and then took another look at his hole. He knew it was nothing to be proud of, but he felt proud nonetheless. He sucked up his last bit of saliva and spit. And we'll pause there for today. We got to chapter 6. Chapter 6 and chapter 7. That was probably one of the longer chapters. But anyways, I just want to thank you. I know that went a little bit long, but remember, if for some reason you missed out yesterday, where we had the beginning of the story, please go to either the Facebook site or go to my playlist on YouTube, and you can go to this link and you can watch it, and you can hear about how our story of holes started. Now, with that being said, we since things went a little bit long with that chapter, and I'm still having some technical difficulties, we're not going to be doing our song today because we're doing something a little bit different. But we're going to go and do our closing. You can dance to this. Have a great day, you guys. Go forth. Go make a difference. Love you guys. Many blessings.